America was just beginning to become a major world power. It wasn't really till after the First World War when America got involved in, as it has happened in the Second World War. Without American involvement, Europe would have probably lost the wars, or at least the Western powers would have lost the wars. But it's also no surprise to me, when you think about it, that what followed immediately after the passing of this act, the First World War. And who made money out of the First World War? The arms manufacturers. And after the First World War, you had the rise of Hitler. Now, how did Hitler rise to power? A country that had been brought to its knees by the First World War and the signing of the Versailles Treaty and huge reparations that they had to make. How were they allowed to achieve this power and rearm and be a major threat to the world? Who was financing that? I think we know that it's the same people that are controlling things today.
Right, just one thing, just a second. Just before we came down there's a program about Harold Wilson, which confirms what you were saying. It's not just Kennedy, it's Wilson they wanted to get rid of too. There was a program about that.
Oh yeah, I mean these things are going all the time. You know, I'm like you. I vote at elections. I walk into the polling station. We do things the old-fashioned way, Sherry. We don't have machines that rely on hanging chards or whatever they're called. We actually have a piece of paper, ballot paper, with the name of each candidate, and we get a little pencil which is on a piece of string in a little booth, and we put an X next to our candidate and put it inside a metal box, and those are taken away and counted.
Somebody just
Well, I vote every general election, every local election, but when I leave the polling station, I think to myself, have I really taken part in democracy? Somehow I have an empty feeling. I don't think I have. I don't think there is, if you study it close enough, such a thing as democracy. When you can have a government that is elected by the minority of the people anyway, that's not democracy to me.
That is the real conspiracy ever since the end of the 19th century, is a conspiracy against democracy. Because if we had true democracy, we would have a very different society than one we have.
I've often wondered if everybody that was entitled to vote, certainly in this country, actually did vote, what kind of government we would have then, because the governments are elected by a minority of the people. I mean, what a general election have a turnout of, what, 55, 60%, 65% at the most? And then a percentage of those vote for a particular party. But because we have three main parties in this country, the party that has the majority is actually voted by the minority of the country. So that's not democracy as I understand it, the will of the majority. So
I think in Australia they have to vote in Australia.
That's a terrible arrangement.
But I don't know if that creates a better result. But I think.
Well, I don't know. I just think it would be interesting if everybody who had the vote in this country were to exercise it. We just want to see, where we had a truly representative government. Of course, there are other arguments about should you bring in proportional representation and so on, but maybe that's worth experimenting with. But as I say, the governments in this country are not elected by the majority.
I think there are some countries that do have democracy. I think most of the Scandinavian countries have democracy, and they've got much better societies because of it.
Yeah, but
could you tell the people the story you told me just now about the stockpiling, which I didn't know?
Yeah, John mentioned the stockpile scandal of the 1950s, when they were stockpiling materials ostensibly to use in the event of a major crisis like a war, and they were overcharging the government and so on, all these sort of various financial shenanigans to make money out of the situation. Well, in January of 1962, at a press conference that President Kennedy gave, just prior to the question and answer session, he made an announcement that he had discovered irregularities in the stockpile issue, and he set up an investigation, and it was investigated during his term of office. But after he was assassinated, nothing was heard about this again. In fact, much of the money that was overspent by the government was just when President Kennedy was elected, he just wrote it off, you know, because I wouldn't be surprised if he was involved in it at all. Many of his friends were involved. It was just it was just simply and basically a financial corruption scandal, which President Kennedy knew about it and wanted to bring into the open. He died, the scandal was forgotten. Just another example of what was going on and one of the other reasons why it was killed. I think it all comes down basically to money. And obviously a great deal of money. Money is power, wealth is power, and you have the power to influence events. If you're taking this money away from these institutions, you may be, you may hopefully bring back the power to control the country, but to the people. Look at the country, America, this country, and most of the Western democracies are not controlled by the people, they're controlled by these elite groups. And as I say, it's still happening today. And most people just not particularly concerned about it, as long as they can have their own lives and lead a reasonably comfortable life. They're not worried about this fact that billions and billions of dollars and so on is going to these people. Right, I think, is that it? Any more?
I was just going to say, Barry, you paint a very, for an amateur like myself in the Kennedy assassination, for someone with an interest, you paint a very kind of sordid kind of picture, really. And I just wanted to pick you up on that kind of question about money and whatever.
Yeah.
And I was going to kind of ask you about, Johnson and Great Society, and didn't he try and approach the kind of problems of the US in kind of in looking at kind of financial matters, particularly in his kind of Great Society program?
Well, he did. He did carry on. He carried on some of the policies of President Kennedy by championing the civil rights movement, or pushing through the civil rights acts of '64 and '65. And he did. I think Johnson was an enigma. On one side, you have this, as you talk about the Great Society. It's a wonderful concept, unless you happen to be to the far right, of course. When we should look after the weak in society. And it's a highly commendable thing that he did. He tried to push this thing through. But then you have the other side of Johnson. Johnson pushing the Vietnam War. And I think, was it Douglas MacArthur said, you should never get involved in a land war in Asia because you just cannot win it. I mean,
His advice to Kennedy, wasn't it?
well, yes, exactly, and well, I think he took the advice. But don't forget, Lyndon Johnson was under the influence, as you spoke to earlier, of the arms manufacturers and all these other.
But also, sorry that I missed that speech, but Johnson was under the influence of Kennedy's advisors. McNamara, all those people were Kennedy advisors.
He got rid of all these advisors.
No. What advisors did Johnson get rid of?
He got rid of these
His foreign policy. No, but McNamara stayed. I mean, McNamara was heavily involved in the TFX scandal. He was highly compromised by Johnson. So he lose Johnson's name. But people like Roger Hilton, who was the chief advisor on Southeast Asian affairs, who was attempting to follow through Kennedy's policy of having broad-based coalition governments in the third world, he was sacked immediately. And he went on record and explained how he got rid of all those people who were arguing that there should be, that Kennedy's foreign policy should continue. But the main team surrounding Johnson's foreign policy was the Kennedy team.
Yeah, but you had a different man in the Oval Office. You had his
They're only following out his policies, Johnson's policies. Johnson was not a foreign policy president. He was a domestic policy president. He was taking a lot of advice from his foreign policy team, experts in foreign policy. McNamara, all those people, who were Kennedy advisors.
He was overruled. I mean, he ordered McNamara to come up with a policy which was issued at a press conference to say that they weren't ready to intervene up until that time. It was only after Goldman was nominated that this policy was about. But behind the scenes, he was working. You listen to his phone calls, his phone out Russian. Because Johnson goes through with that foreign press, he had no experience of foreign press at all until he became president. So he phoned Ocean Russell, who was chairman of the Armed Services Committee, and he was right there about it. And he said about the they discussed Vietnam, and Russell tells him it's disastrous to go into Vietnam. And he agrees with him. But everyone now know from the release documents that the Gulf of Tonkin was completely manufactured by Johnson. It never happened, the attack. He was desperate to send combat troops to Vietnam. Right? Absolutely desperate.
I totally disagree with that.
I mean, if you go a bit, well, there's a book by David Kaiser, for example, American Tragedy, which looks at all the release documents that taken place, they published last year. And it follows this through, it shows quite clearly. Now, Kaiser gives Johnson the benefit of the doubt and believes that he was influenced by the Pentagon into this belief he couldn't actually fight communism. He gives him the benefit of the doubt. But there's no doubt that Johnson was desperate to have a war in Vietnam.
That's totally unscholarly, I think. Sorry.
It's not right. The scholars have already produced books on it. David Kaiser is a foremost expert on
I have to check out that book. I don't know that book.
Yeah, I think
but it's totally kind of unscholarly to say that, you know, Lyndon Johnson was hell bent on a kind of war.
I think you can probably carry on this debate later.
Could I just say to Sherry that we're not, you might think we're not actually anti-American anyway. What we're trying to say is that wherever there's power, there's always this trouble. And it goes right back to Roman history. In our own history, we lost Edward II, Richard II. I mean, it's, as Shakespeare said, uneasy rests ahead, but where's the crown? It's not nothing peculiar to America. We've got a rule
no. Well, I mean,
who goes against its own class.
Who was it said power corrupts? I mean, real power. And absolute power corrupts absolute.
It was David Hackney Phillips who said, when he heard two people discussing a politician talking about him, he said, if you know a man's name, he's not very powerful.
Yeah,
That's about the most political life.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Well, the buck stops at the top always, though,
Ah, yeah, but who is really on the top?
Yeah, exactly.
Who's really on top?
Somebody you don't know, never heard of.
These people are really pulling the
Who's running the
strings.
country then?
Exactly, these people pulling the strings were not elected.
But
They're still
if
doing
anyone
it.
wants to know about Lyndon Johnson's foreign policy and his domestic policy, you must read the telephone tapes.
Oh yes,
It is just amazing. Look.
I agree.
You've never seen him innocent if you don't know if you've read his tape.
But Lyndon Johnson, the archetypal politician, he said one thing to one person and one thing to another, same as Kennedy. For every kind of person you can bring up, like Mike Mansfield, for instance, starts, Kennedy said, oh yeah, give me my second term, I'll be out. We'll be out of Vietnam. You can find a fault, but Kennedy said exactly the same thing. And I'd argue, in the case of Johnson, that is exactly the same. Johnson knows how to speak to different people. He's an archetypal politician.
Give the name of an American advisor then, who says that Kennedy proposed to send troops to Vietnam.
An advisor.
Someone who's in the inside, who the Kennedy.
No,
Everyone who has spoken has said that he planned to get out of Vietnam after his election.
I think we're going to have to move on now because I'm getting on. So no more questions. If not, thank you very much.
Just one very
Oh, sorry.
quick little point. I notice on that Kennedy is actually, he has got authority to do this under a 1933 Act. Does that mean that Franklin Roosevelt was given this power but never actually exercised it?
As far as I know, Kennedy was the only one that actually tried to do something.
It's interesting though that it was given in 1933.
I mean, if you actually read this act, this particular executive order, it amends a previous order, so the whole series of executive orders. But this particular executive order was the one that really hit the fan, and they were really concerned about it. He was actually not talking about it; he was going to do something about it. But of course,
it would be interesting to know why the president was given the authority in 1933. Even if it was never acted.
I've only
I assume
given
it was something to do with.
I mean, I'm certainly not an expert on it. I've only just given a brief
Oh,
outline.
no, it's interesting.
But I think it's an important, it's an important issue, an important part of the whole thing that deserves further study.
Who would that have been in 33 president?
I don't. In 1933, that was Franklin Roosevelt.
Roosevelt did actually reform the banking system in 1933 to get out of the Great Depression.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
So the package is great.
Okay, is that it then?
And some of the similar kind of decisions, say, such as to come off the gold standard, to join the ARM, to form the euro, they haven't triggered such events.
Yeah.
So is your argument really right?
Well, it's, obviously, it's you could disagree with it, but I just don't think. I just think that there is an elite, call it what you like. I mean, Churchill called it the high cabal after the Second World War. But I think it's genuine, it exists. You know, I would recommend you looking into an organisation known as the Bilderberger Group and various things like that. The Trilateral Commission. These are all people that are really behind the scenes pulling the strings.
Yes, there is always a cadre of people like that in every country. It's not unique to America, though.
Oh, no. I'm not singling out America. You know, I mean, obviously the connection here is with the assassination of President Kennedy, you know. But as far as I'm concerned, the people that are in public office, in prime ministers and presidents and so on, in the West, are mere puppets of these people. And politicians don't truly represent the people anyway. There are people outside there. I know it's a very very gloomy thing to talk about, but I think it's a reality. I think we ought to start looking at this, you know, because
Was this